Director of the Swami Vivekanand Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Pandit Kiren Maharaj ji, Mr. Rajish Lutchman, Ms. Shrishti Harinarayan, distinguished guests, online viewers and listeners, Namaskar and welcome to the 10th episode of Aarshdhara. Aarshdhara is an online series of interactions on scriptures composed by ancient sages of India. In this episode of Aarshdhara, we have an interaction on Mandukya Upnishad with Pandit Kiren Maharaj by Mr. Rajish Lutchman. To commence our program, I would like to invite Mr. Rajish Lutchman, the CEO of Hindwani Radio, to render this evening's introductory remarks. This program is in association with Hindi Siksha Sangh of South Africa and Radio Hindwani. Namaste and welcome Rajish ji.
Namaste. Thank you very much for having me, Anjali ji. Dr. Yogi ji, Pandit Kiren Maharaj ji, Shrishti ji, and Piyush ji, thank you very much for once again hosting this program. The Hindi Siksha Sangh and of course Hindwani is deeply grateful to the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center for always including us in their programs. This is the 10th in the Aarshdhara series, and we are hoping that this process unpacks some of the wonderful wisdom that our Upanishads, Vedas have. Today we are talking about the Mandukya Upnishad, and we have the very talented and extremely competent Pandit Kiren Maharaj with us, who's going to be answering some of our questions. Having said this, on behalf of the Hindi Siksha Sangh and on behalf of all of you, I accord our listeners and of course our viewers a very, very warm welcome. Namaste.
So much, Mr. Rajesh Lutchman ji, for those introductory remarks. To commence today's program, I would like to invite our guest of this evening, this morning, Pandit Kiren Maharaj ji. Just a brief background about Pandit ji. He is formerly from Durban and now live and work in Centurion. He is an attorney by profession and has been a Purohit since 2006. He is a Purohit affiliated with the Sri Sanathan Dharma Sabha of South Africa, Purohit Mandal, and is presently the resident priest of the Midran Hindu Dharma Sabha. He will be interacting with Mr. Rajish Lutchman ji, who is the CEO of Hindwani Radio. Now let us welcome Pandit Kiren Maharaj ji and Mr. Rajish Lutchman ji from the interaction on Mandukya Upnishad on this 10th episode of Aarshdhara.
Dhanyavad. Thank you very much, Pandit ji. It's wonderful to have you on this program, and I'm hoping at the end of the program, after we unpack certain elements of the Mandukya Upanishad, our listeners and viewers will be a little bit more aware of the gems that are in these scriptures. So welcome to the program. Perhaps we could start off with you talking to our listeners and our of course our viewers about the Mandukya Upanishad in terms of a kind of introduction.
Namaste to the panel and to all of those you listening in today. We'll begin with a brief prayer. Shuklam Bharadaram Vishnum Shashivaranam Chaturbhajam Prasanavadhanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashante Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vaje Bhirvajini Vati Dhinam Mavitrayavatu. So we'll begin with what are the Upanishads? They are a part of the Vedas and comprise philosophical concepts that are based on the knowledge contained within the Vedas. There are 108 major Upanishads, and most are in the form of a conversation or dialogue between teacher and student, guru and shishya, and cover questions such as who am I and what is reality? Are there ways that we can be content while on earth? And if so, what are those ways? Upa means by, and Nishad means to sit down. So Upanishad therefore literally means sitting down near a learned person. With regards to the Mandukya Upanishad appears in the Atharva Veda. There are several theories as to where the name Mandukya is derived from. One is that this Upanishad was revealed to and composed by Rishi Mandukya. Another is the Sanskrit word Mandukya, which means frog in English. And the reason for this name is referring to the metamorphosis of the frog from a tadpole to an adult frog, and is an allegory for our enlightenment and spiritual growth. Just 12 verses, the Mandukya Upanishad is the shortest Upanishad, but it seeks to answer one of the most fundamental questions: who am I? Adi Shankara stated that the entire wisdom of the Upanishads can be found within the brief text of the Mandukya. If we apply the rules of Sandhi for Sanskrit, just joining Mandukya and Upanishad, we get the alternative name of Mandukya Upanishad. So the way that we normally learn about Sanatana Dharma is by the manner of listening to stories or kathas. So one of the manners in which we learn of the Upanishads are through kathas. And a famous katha pertinent to the Mandukya is about a dream that Raja Janaka had. So this is the same Raja Janaka that is the father of Sita Mata. So they say that one night Janaka had fallen asleep, and it was a deep sleep, but suddenly he was awoken. And his guards told him that the kingdom was under attack and that they should try and escape. So taking his sword, he rushes out. You find out that 3 days later, he has been separated from his guards, and he is hungry, and he lets out a cry of frustration. The soldiers from the neighboring kingdom hear his scream, and they say, someone is near here, and they proceed to draw an arrow, and he hears it, and he hears that the arrow has been let go. And then he is woken up by his wife to say that it was just a dream. And he then asks this question of his wife, but he wishes that it was as simple as just saying it was a dream, but it isn't. The question that he asks is, which one is real? This world with you in it, or that world where I was about to kill by an arrow of an enemy soldier? Is this real, or is that real? The queen called many of their ministers and physicians, and all of them said, no, this life that you are living now, where you are awake, is the one that is real. Eventually, a great sage called Aarshdhara, who was passing through Mithila, arrived at the palace gates and asked to see the king. When the king asked him his question, is this real, or is that real? Aarshdhara let out a full-throated laugh and said, with a wink, neither of them is, O king. Instantly, Janak lit up with happiness. Aha, he said, this makes me feel so much better. Although, if it is true, it begs the question, then what is real? It does, agreed Aarshdhara. But first, let me ask you a question. Would you say, O king, that you are present, actually present in your nightmare? I most certainly was, said the king, shuddering. I heard the twang of the bowstring, felt the warm, fetid breath of the boars. All right, tell me. And would you say that you are here now in this palace, reclining on the soft pillows as you lie on these silken sheets? I guess I would. Well then, said Aarshdhara, there is your answer. Neither is real, nor is this real. But you, O king, who were present there and are present here, you are the only one that is real. When you say I am real, do you mean my physical body, which is here and now, said King Janaka, who was puzzled? Or do you mean my dream body, which fled the palace while my physical body still lay supine on this bed? Who am I? Aha, said Aarshdhara. Now that is the real question, isn't it? Rajesh?
Ji. So if you talking about this as an introduction of the Mandukya Upanishad, so the essence of it, perhaps you want to quickly paraphrase that?
So the Mandukya Upanishad is considered an important scripture because it has the potential to lead us to our ultimate goal of self-realization. We are all sequenced on a different level on this journey of self-discovery. We wish to attain union or yoga with Brahman. The Bhagavad Gita teaches us that our delusion or ego creates an impediment in this journey because we think that we are the doer. The Mandukya Upanishad teaches us that all this verily is Brahman. The self is Brahman. But what is Brahman? When I go out to do puja, I try and explain it as the all-pervading entity who we call Bhagavan or Paramatma. That is the reason for all creation. And that during this puja, we are attempting to create a spiritual link between our Jiva Atma and that Paramatma that is one and the same. It is our delusion that makes us think that we are separate from Bhagavan. This is also the basis for Advaita Vedanta, or the teaching of non-duality. So in the Katha I told you about King Jagannath, he had this delusion about whether or not his dream self was real or his physical self is real. But what we will later learn is that neither of them are actually real. It is when we come to this realization that Brahman is actually what is real, that we will realize our true self.
Thank you for that.
What-
That's
Okay.
Continue.
No, you may continue there, Rajesh.
Yeah,
Bhai.
thank you. So if we compare the Mandukya Upanishad to the other Upanishads and of course some of the other Shastras, in your opinion, what is special and unique about the Mandukya Upanishad?
Um, in the Mukita Upanishad, Sri Ram, he reveals to Hanumanji, if you had to pick just one Upanishad to master, Vayuputra, pick the Mandukya, you will reach a goal of self-realization. This would obviously have to depend on where the aspirant is on his path of self-realization. Hanumanji is the paramount devotee of Sri Ram and would have been well on his way to self-realization. Sri Ram goes on to state that if you do not attain the realization you seek from Mandukya, then study the 10 principal Upanishads, or the 32 major ones, or in fact, all 108. The Mandukya reveals to us from the very first verse that Om Itye Etad Aksharam Idam Sarvam, this all imperishable word Om is the whole of the visible universe. All that is past, present, and future is verily Om. That which is beyond the triple conception of time is verily Om. Om is Brahman. I am Atma Brahman. All this verily is Brahman. The self is Brahman. Therefore, this Atma inside you, your individual soul, that Atma is also Brahman. This when is what is enlightening about the Mandukya. However, it isn't as easy as just getting to know that you are Brahman. You need to experience it for yourself through sadhana and meditation. So, in this story of Raja Janak's dream, Ashtabakra told him both the real world and the dream world were not real. The rishis from eons past have expounded that when we realize who we really are, when we understand that we are no different from any other creature in the world, we will awake to a new world, one in which we are truly free from dreams and delusion. Sat is the knowledge of oneness, the true knowledge. That state of consciousness in which Sat is gained is Chit. That is the true consciousness. And bliss that is beyond, that is to be enjoyed rather, when Sat and Chit come together, is the truest, purest bliss, Ananda. You must all strive to attain Satchitananda, where our delusions are dispelled and where we achieve unending, unchanging, glorious bliss. While I was doing the research for today's presentation, I came across many commentaries on the Upanishads by revered gurus such as Adi Shankaracharya, Swami Shivananda, Swami Krishnananda, Swami Chinmayananda and Tejomayananda, and also from the Ramakrishna Mission. There are various English commentaries available online. When studying, it is always best to find a teacher you resonate with. And for me personally, I stumbled across such a teacher a few years ago, surprisingly on YouTube. His name is Swami Sarvapriyananda of the Vedanta Society of New York. He explains the Upanishads succinctly and in a manner that the contents thereof is understandable to one and all. Rajesh Bhai?
Thank you. So, one of the challenges we have in the modern world is to seek how relevant these ancient scriptures are to us in our present day life. So, looking at the Mandukya Upanishad, why would you consider it being, or the wisdom in the Mandukya Upnishad, why would you consider it to be relevant for 21st century living?
Okay. Even though the Upanishads were composed thousands of years ago, they teach us how to live contentedly, be more fulfilled, and have better lives through thinking more holistically. They teach us to question everything, even the very concept of God, and to approach our religion scientifically. Ancient seekers had the same questions that we have today, regarding the nature of self and reality. The Mandukya, like other Upanishads and scriptures, are relevant today, especially due to the trials that the world is currently going through. Questions that I'm often asked in my role as a Purohit are: is this all that we are living, this life of us? Is there nothing more to it? Where is God? Why does God make us suffer? The Upanishads attempt to answer these questions, and the Mandukya goes to the heart of the issue from the outset by revealing to us that we are Brahman, not just humans, but all life. Upanishads are readily available in a myriad of languages, from the original Sanskrit, Hindi, and English, amongst others. Rajesh bhai?
Thank you for that. Indeed, the purpose of the Upanishads is for us to be introspective and see what other values we have in life besides this material perspective that we see normally. So, thank you very much for that wisdom, Panditji. One of the beautiful things about the Upanishads and of course the Vedas is the music contained in the recitation of these verses. And I'm appealing to you to perhaps recite a few of these verses for us so that our people get the feel of what the syntax is and what the meter is when one reads Vedic mantras.
So our scriptures are written in rhyming meters called chandas. And I'm going to try and recite these for you, and I will explain what I am reading. So this is a very short Upanishad. There's only 12 verses to it. So I'm going to read a few of you and the relevant translations for you as well, right? Sarvavam hetat brahma ayam atma brahmaso ayam atma chatushvat. All this is verily Brahman. This Atma, the Supreme Himself, is Brahman. This Atma has 4 quarters, 4 feet, not like those of a cow, but like the fractions of a coin. The first quarter is Vaishvanara, whose sphere is a state of waking, who is conscious of external objects. The second quarter is the Tejasa, whose sphere or field or place is the dream, who is conscious of the internal objects. The third quarter or condition is a Prajna, whose sphere is deep sleep, in whom all experiences have become one, who is verily a mass of consciousness, who is full of bliss, who enjoys bliss, and who is the way of leading to the knowledge. The wise think that the fourth, Turiya, is unseen, unrelated, incomprehensible, undefinable, unthinkable, indescribable, the sole essence of this consciousness of the self, with no trace of conditioned world, the peaceful, all bliss, non-dual. This is the Atma, the self, and it is to be realized. So I am Atma Dhyaksharam, Omkaro Adimataram, Pada Matra Matrascha, Pada Akara Ukara Makara Iti. This is that Atma, even with regard to the letters of the word Om. It is the Omkara with its parts. The quarters are the parts, and the parts are the quarters. The parts of Om are A, U, and Ma. That which has no parts is the fourth, transcendental, destitute of phenomenal existence, all bliss and non-dual. This verily is Omkara. He who knows this merges his self into the self. So what they are saying here is that Om, that is the word Om that we recite when we are praying, that is Brahman. And that Om, so that comprises these 3 parts that I've mentioned, being the Vaishvanara, Tejasa, and Prajna. And the pause afterwards is Turiya. So Om, and that last part there would be the Turiya, the non-dual. Rajesh bhai?
Thank you so much for that wonderful wisdom. Now, very often, many elements of our Shastras and the Upanishads included in this represent Indian knowledge that is universally applicable, as well as it is relevant for the entire creation. So, looking at the Mandukya Upanishad, how is this true of the Mandukya Upanishad?
So the Mandukya applies not just to all human beings, but to all of creation, because it tells us that I am Atma Brahma. All this verily is Brahman. The self is Brahman. Once we as human beings realize that we are all part of the same creation, pervaded by the same Brahman, know that we are Brahman, then I think that we'll begin treating each other better. Most of us are currently driven by our egos and equating our individual identities as being real, that we forget the simple fact being expounded here in the Mandukya, I am Atma Brahma. Just imagine how much better the world would be if we all recognize the simple truth. These petty differences will fall away and we will be able to advance in leaps and bounds as society. We will respect not just each other, but all life. Rajesh, right?
Gee, thank you very much for that, Panditji. Uh, One of the reasons we have these programs is to encourage people to read and learn and research these wonderful scriptures. So, did you find or experience any challenges, personal challenges, as we are researching for this topic, sir?
So when I first contemplated studying the Upanishads, I actually started by studying the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So whilst by no means easy, it provided me with the foundation to begin studying the Upanishads, as many of the philosophical ideas expounded in the Bhagavad Gita by Sri Krishna to Arjuna are present in the Upanishads. So whilst studying to become a Purohit, part of our studies did entail learning the Bhagavad Gita. But on top of that, I also did a first certificate in Bhagavad Gita studies from the Ramakrishna Mission. So that does go into more detail. And I feel that because of gaining that knowledge, I am better prepared to assist my yajmans, and also when at satsang, the devotees that attend, I'm able to explain things better to them. However, the question was where to start from the 108 Upanishads. So I happened to hear a katha about Nachiket, who appears in the Katha Upanishad, and it was very fascinating. This small boy, he challenges his father because the father was giving out emaciated animals in Dan. And then he says, no, but then who are you going to give me to? Because I'm your most precious possession. And he says, I'm going to give you to Yamraj. And I thought that was so fascinating because then you see his interaction with Yamraj. It showed not only his quick wit, but also Nachiket's humility. However, in comparison, the Mandukya, with just its 12 verses, while being straightforward, took more time to understand. It contains many deep philosophical ideas. Can the answer that is being proposed about Omkar and Brahma be that simple? In order to find out, because you can read the translation and it might make sense to you. However, our Swamis, and these are modern giants like Swami Shivananda, Swami Chinmayananda, they've written brilliant commentaries on the Mandukya, and there are even lectures on YouTube for those of you out there who are technologically savvy. And these assisted me to understand Mandukya better, but I am by no means an expert. I believe that this will take years of further study and sadhana on my part in order to understand it better. Rajesh Bhai?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. I suppose the study of any scripture also demands one needs to be inspired and motivated to study. How do you personally get this motivation and study and continue your adventures into understanding the various shastras, including the Mandukya Upanishad?
Okay. I remember that from a young age, my family would tell me stories about Sanatan Dharma, of how Hanumanji ate the sun thinking it was a fruit, and how Mahadev's throat turned blue. When I could learn and remember, my father taught us daily Sandhya, where my siblings and I learned various mantras that were committed to memory. My Nana would call me a Pandit from then on. I eventually began my studies in Karmakand, where I learned to become a Purohit. However, just because I could now do puja did not mean that my learning stopped. I realized that there were some questions that my Yajmans had that I did not know the entire answer to. And in an effort to able to serve them better, I expanded my knowledge in order to able to share it with them. I was always taught by my various teachers to share my knowledge selflessly. This is essentially where I got my inspiration to study the Mandukya. It very succinctly tells us about the nature of reality. And my learning hasn't stopped, and I think it never will. Rajesh Bhai?
Panditji, it's been such a wonderful pleasure talking to you and chatting to you about the Mandukya Upanishad. And I'm sure our listeners and viewers out there would have a completely refreshed perception of the Mandukya. And hopefully it will motivate them to go and read it and study more about it. So on behalf of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center and the Hindi Siksha Sangh and Hindwani, we want to thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for the energy you put into preparing for this year. We've come to the end of the interview, and I want to say once again thank you. I want to hand over now. But before we go there, perhaps a word or two in conclusion from you.
Okay, I actually think that it is very important for our youth to get more involved in studying our scriptures. It is very important because they are the future of Sanatan Dharma in South Africa. Rajesh Bhai, in Gauteng, when I initially started puja, there were lots of youngsters asking me questions on why do we do certain things. For example, they want to know why do we do puja? How do we know that Bhagwan is hearing our prayers? They even ask what happens when we die. And from that, they also asked about reincarnation, and it just went on and on. And it's not enough that we as elders and learned people just tell them, oh, because our scriptures say so. We can't just give them that answer. You have to tell them what the scriptures actually say. So from that interaction, I began providing answers to, during my puja vidhi, teaching all yajmans like those children. Some of the answers could only be found by studying scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads. By studying the Mandukya, youngsters will find the answer to questions such as, who am I really? Children are curious, and they are the future of Sanatan Dharma in South Africa. They need to be armed with knowledge that has scriptural backing. And depending on the age of the youngsters, in South Africa currently, there are Bal Bihar classes, the certificates being offered by the Sri Ramakrishna Mission, such as the certificate in Hindu Studies and the certificate in Bhagavad Gita. Even various online classes and seminars are being offered by the Chinmaya Mission, and also lectures that are available on YouTube. My advice to our youngsters would be to go out there and start now. The answers that they seek are within their grasp. Rajesh Bhai, and thank you so much for interviewing me today. It was a pleasure trying to share whatever I have learned with you. Prem Namaste.
Thank you very much, Panditji. आपका बहुत आभार हूँ. धन्यवाद. Anjali ji, over to you now.
Thank you so much, Pandit ji and Rajesh ji, for that very profound interaction. We definitely gained so much more knowledge on Mandukya Upnishad, the reason why it's important for all the generations to have knowledge about this scripture. We had some beautiful insights on all this by Pandit ji. With that, we have come to the close of this episode of Aarshdhara. I would like to introduce Ms. Srishti Harinarayan from the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India, Durban, to render this evening's vote of thanks.
Namaskar. On behalf of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, it gives me great pleasure in rendering this evening's vote of thanks. The Aarshdhara episode 10 was in association with the Hindi Siksha Sangh of South Africa and Hindwani Radio. We'd like to say a deep thank you and gratitude to Pandit Kiren Maharaj ji, Mr. Rajish Lutchman, COO of Hindwani radio station and the Hindi Siksha Sangh of South Africa, Ms. Anjali Modi for being our lovely program director this evening, Mr. Piyush Khandelwal for all your support. Also, thank you goes out to Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban. But most importantly, we'd like to say thank you to you, our online guests and viewers. Please stay tuned to social media pages of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center for what's happening next. Namaskar.